Soulkin is a roguelite turn-based tactics game where you play as Nadia off to go and save the world. But she can only do this by dishing out monsters known as Soulkin onto the battlefield to go and kill other monsters. These will take place over hexagonal grid procedurally generated battle arenas that take place on a procedurally generated map in a region. And so long as you go and kill everything and build up your army of Soulkin, you can then go and attack some of the end bosses that are dotted around that map to then proceed to the next region and continue. The game is released into early access and the first 2 regions are available, but it gives you plenty of hours of gameplay to really understand the loop of how Soulkin is going to develop and expand over time. And it's a bit of a learning curve to get used to this game, but I really liked it the more I played this game, and that's why I wanted to do this video. Nadia, your character, can't attack anything directly, but what she can do is deploy various monsters called Soulkin into the battlefield, and they all come with various different strengths and weaknesses. Each one has 2 moves per turn, and that might mean that they can move one and attack one. Some of them have a special skill where they can attack on both of their goals. Some of them are ranged attacks rather than melee attacks, and some of them add status ailments such as burning or weakness or the fact that they are cracked, so therefore they take extra damage. And some of the Soulkin come with additional buffs when they originally are launched onto the battlefield, such as shields that reduce down attacks by 1. All of these different Soulkin can be discovered through natural gameplay, and whilst you'll have only initially 4 at the beginning of each run to take into battle, over the course of a run you'll be looking at expanding out your army of Soulkin by defeating enemies and having a randomly generated chance that they'll join onto your team too. And this means that whilst you'll only ever be able to deploy 3, 4 or 5 perhaps Soulkin into a battle at any one time, should any of those be defeated, you can then deploy your 6th, 7th and 8th ones onto the battlefield, and it becomes a real testament of size of army battles, which is really crucial when you go into really challenging battles where elites, which are beefed up versions of the standard monsters, come into play, and especially the really difficult end bosses at the end of each region that you can battle in, because they are beefy and they will slay monsters for breakfast. They are super overpowered. It's probably why one big takeaway from Soulkin is that the bosses are a real step up, and it's going to mean that you're going to need to grind quite a bit to be powerful enough to take them down, regardless of how good your tactics are. And this is where I really started to enjoy Soulkin for the gameplay loop it had to offer, because this didn't really click with me initially. As you go onto the battlefield, all of your Soulkin have multiple options for what they want to do with those 2 movements. But Nadia, as I said beforehand, can't kill anything. But what she can do is absorb the souls of anything that you've killed, so long as they're within 2 hexagon tiles of where she is. And you'll have to prioritise this alongside healing or buffing some of your Soulkin on your side. But what this does is it starts to bring up an affinity score with the certain enemies that you're absorbing. And whenever you've absorbed 5 of them, or 10 of them, over the course of your gameplay run, your affinity level with them starts to level up. And this means that you'll start to get buffs. Some of them will be direct for Nadia, like increasing her health, or perhaps triggering a chance that she might be able to heal someone for 2 HP rather than 1, or buffing them for 2 attack rather than 1. Or it could be that some of the actual Soulkin, when you've got them on your team, become buffed over time. So that could be that their overall health or attack goes up, or it could be that their range increases, or it could be that they now have a status effect added onto the good side when they're on your army. And this is really how the progression of Soulkin comes into feeling much more roguelite over time, because at the beginning of the game you are going in basic bitch for all of this stuff, and so Nadia dies really quickly. all of your Soulkin have got really weak health and very weak damage. But also what kind of limits you is you'll be able to see that there's like a blue hovering fire next to all of the different Soulkin, and also on the left hand side in the UI there's kind of a out of like 8, 9, 10 or whatever it is. Now this is your soul power. It takes a certain amount of soul power or energy to deploy Soulkin onto the battlefield. So you're kind of ceilinged depending on how good that is. And as you level up affinity with Soulkin by absorbing their dead versions that you've killed over time, some of those Soulkin will beef up the ceiling of that. And you'll also be able to, by killing and defeating treasure chests during runs, unlock potentially an increase in your energy over time as well. And so that enables you to then put potentially more Soulkin onto the battlefield, but also you can start deploying beefier and more expensive ones that come with more HP, more attack damage, maybe some status effects. Maybe they can change some of the actual terrain that's going on around you, because some of the Soulkin can push various different like rocks around or trees around or something like that, whereas others can turn some of the ground into like a poisonous floor or a floor that catches fire. So they are expensive, but you can't get to them straight away at the beginning of a run, so you can't go in totally OP. But if you pick off all of the easy battles and the mediums and the hards, it just depends on how the RNG of the overworld map kind of triggers for you. You can build up a really big army, level up Nadia so that she's then much more useful in the course of battle, and then use good tactics to defeat all of the different enemies whilst making sure that you don't lose too many Soulkin on your way. It's a real balance. It is a grind, but it was an enjoyable grind that got better and better the more I understood all of these key mechanics and how they work together. And as you started to level up affinities of certain Soulkin, I could then start to see all of these different little tiny improvements to Nadia or my creatures were starting to have a cumulative effect over time. And then those bosses that I was complaining about earlier, whilst I still think they're OP, start to become slowly within reach over time. But it's going to take you several hours and it's going to be a grind. And because of the RNG nature, sometimes runs are just against you and you can decide to just surrender those and pick up all of that affinity that you've added over time and just go again. And sometimes it's quicker and easier to just admit defeat early on and go again. And I did that several times to make sure that I didn't just leave myself in a hiding to nowhere. You can only lose when Nadia dies, and usually that means that all of your Soulkin have died along the way. So at least death isn't necessarily totally permanent here because of that affinity carrying over run to run to run, and that's really your meta progression in this game. But I could see some people getting a bit frustrated in that just Nadia will die an awful lot. And she's pretty weak in the game, to be fair. And yeah, you need to kind of be aggressive whilst also protect her at all costs, because it's just a couple of hits and she's out for the count. And you have to be really, really careful, particularly on playing fields that have got a lot of moving parts going on or narrow corridors, for example. I've had great fun with Soulkin. It took me about an hour to make sure everything clicked into place, and then hour 2 onwards I really very much enjoyed. And whilst it's difficult to give this a kind of overarching rating because it's just the two first regions of this game being available, with 32 Soulkin to recruit but 49 in the game in total currently, there's a lot to uncover. And whilst it might be a bit of a grind for some people, I found that grind to be quite satisfying over time and give it a thumbs up for the time being. And let's hope the rest of the game rolls out to the same level of finesse and intrigue that this initial early access release tantalisingly alludes to. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane-network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.